Science, economics, history, family, social issues, education, religion, government, or national security. Brannon brings the issues of the day into clear focus through the lens of a Judeo-Christian worldview. And now, here is your host, Brannon Howse.
And welcome to the broadcast on this Thursday night, September 18th, 2025. We're going to have Mike Lindell on to talk about the cancellation or suspension, at least, I don't know where this is going, of Jimmy Kimmel. What does Mike Lindell think about it? I'm going to tell you what I think about it. I think when you have the FCC, Federal Communications Commissioner, out there talking about taking away people's license if they don't comply with certain political views or ideas, we're in dangerous territory. When we have the Attorney General talking about prosecuting people for hate speech, for saying hateful things and dumb things, disgusting things, that's dangerous. I said that the other day, right? Same thing goes with the FCC. Really? Do we really want to limit people's right of free speech, even when they say hateful things and stupid things? Because who defines these terms, hateful? I know what I think is hateful. But how do we know someone else doesn't say, well, when Brannon talks about Islam or the LGBTQ community, or he wants to read from Romans chapter 1 and then give commentary on the LGBTQ, that's hateful. He's Islamophobic, he's homophobic, he's xenophobic. This is not in the public interest. Therefore, he should be kicked off of terrestrial radio. And if those stations don't do it, we should take their FCC license. Do we want to go there? Are we not falling into a trap, folks? I don't like what Jimmy Kimmel said, but is the solution the government putting pressure on companies and their license? Shouldn't people have the right to say dumb things, stupid things, even things we find vile? Now, there are broadcasting standards when it comes to obscenity, pornography, terroristic threats, right? Inciting riots or insurrection. But didn't Jimmy Kimmel express a view that doesn't fall into those categories? Look, I'm not here to defend Jimmy Kimmel, what he said. I'm simply saying we better be careful. This is a double-edged sword. And the next administration may be someone that says, well, we don't think it's in the public interest to have conservative Christian radio on terrestrial radio or terrestrial television. And then what if we start empowering this idea onto networks that aren't terrestrial, onto internet platforms, Roku, Apple TV, etc.? I just think we have to be very careful. But I want to see what Mike Lindell thinks tonight. Then I'm going to be joined by Hedieh Mirahmadi. The FBI director the other day, Kash Patel, in a committee talked about nihilistic violent extremists. What are nihilistic violent extremists? By the way, was the shooter that murdered, or that we're told murdered Charlie Kirk, was he at all backed by the Islamist? Are the Islamists, are they militarizing the LGBTQ community? In other words, they don't care if they convert to Islam. They just want to use them as cannon fodder for a revolution. Are they going outside of their normal methods, jihadist, Islamist doing jihad, and now willing to take non-Islamist to do jihad? Let's ask a lady that was inside the government, working with the FBI and at the State Department and trying to figure out what ISIS was doing and stop it. We're going to deal with that. Then we're going to have on Chris Martenson. We're going to talk about free speech. We're going to talk about what President Trump said to an ABC reporter, which, again, I have some issues with because, again, I'm a very, very strong guy on the First Amendment. We're going to talk about digital ID, Palantir, social credit scores, the collapse of the U.S. dollar, the cut of the interest rates by the Fed, more to come. Will this create more inflation? How much? 5%, 10%, 15%? Can you trust the government's numbers on consumer pricing index, CPI, which is supposed to track inflation. Can we trust the government on the issue of not leading us into hyperinflation? And therefore, how do you protect yourself? Is it about making money now, or is it more about asset preservation? We're going to get to all that tonight with my very esteemed guest. So before we get to it, remember, we're brought to you by you, okay? If you appreciate all we're doing, we have to have your support. One way you can support us is through our foundation, worldviewfoundation.com, worldviewfoundation.com. Again, Worldview Foundation. I have a lower third for that, guys. worldviewfoundation.com. You'll also find our mailing address there if you prefer to support us through the mail. Somebody moved my business cards. Where'd my business cards go? You can get a free pack of business cards. I don't know where they went. You can get a free pack of business cards when you go to worldviewstore.com. I still don't think they put up the Worldview Foundation. Let's call Logan. You have a little phone over here. Watch, this is going to ring in there. There we go. Now I got a lower third. All right. There we go. Thank you. So you guys always wonder what that phone is for. That's what it's for. Now I got a lower. Now I think I got his attention. Apparently he's talking to somebody in the control room. So worldviewfoundation.com. Now he sees I'm going on to Bella Grace. MelissaHouseBG.com, MelissaHouseBG.com. I take it each and every day to get this great hair growth, hands not cracking and bleeding, no more Pepcid since December of 2023. That's another way you can support us right there. You guys know where my business cards went, Logan? Somebody moved them. That's all right. I can make it without it. But if you want to get a free stack of my business cards that promote our Worldview Tube, all you got to do is go to worldviewstore.com, worldviewstore.com. We have a lower third for that, but he's going to have a hard time switching the lower third when you're sitting right here next to me. But we don't know where. Someone stole our business cards. Wait a minute. Go to a wide shot. I think I figured out where my business cards. Why are you leaving? I was about to question her and she got up to leave. Dolly, did you eat the business cards? The whole audience knows you love those business cards. They have seen you try to eat them on multiple occasions. And right when I looked at her and started questioning her, she got up, walked out of the room. I know that dog understands me. I think, yeah, you're in front of the camera, Logan. Look at that. I do think we found the culprit, folks, of who stole my little stack of Worldview 2 business cards that you can get free of charge at worldviewstore.com. Whoa, there they are. Look at that. Your old man can still catch. Woo! You know what? They do have some teeth marks in them. We found them. There you go. Get your free pack. Now, our national conference is coming up. You guys all know about that. But you're definitely going to want to live stream it if you can't be with us. worldviewtube.com/vault. worldviewtube.com/vault. Logan, when we go off the air and we post this up the next day, we do always post the introductions, right? We are now. So you're telling me out of all the years we've been doing this now, we're losing all these wonderful, funny ad-lib openings? Yeah. We want to keep this stuff around. This is good stuff. All right. Thank you for your support. Thank you for helping us keep the network going. All right. Worldviewtube.com/sponsors, worldviewtube.com/sponsors. They're there. Help us out, get great products, and help keep this network going. Worldviewtube.com/sponsors. Now, you might want to tweet, Facebook, Getter, Truth Social, whatever you do. Let them know we're about to have Mike Lindell on to talk about Jimmy Kimmel. We got a great lineup tonight. I guarantee you we're going to stimulate your mind. You're going to be blown away by some of the stuff we're going to talk about tonight, which I guarantee you others aren't talking about, which is what makes this network and this broadcast so different from all those other shows that are just right, left, Democrats, Republicans. That's boring. It's also a huge distraction. Don't fall for that. All right? But in the meantime, remember, worldviewtube.com/sponsors. Joining me now is Mike Lindell, CEO of MyPillow. Mike, welcome back. Great to have you.
Get the band back together, Brannon, huh?
Yes, we are. Yes,
our
we
old
are.
Our old buddy Jimmy's in the news.
Oh, he is in the news for sure. All right. So here, let me tell you what my analysis is. I am all about free speech. I'm about the Constitution. I'm about free speech. I'm about the free market. And I think if Sinclair or what's the other company? Nexstar, if they want to get rid of him, that's their right as a company. They can do that. The free market says people don't want to hear it. We're going to lose advertisers, audience. It's not a good business model for us. We don't want to do this. We don't like what he said. Fine, no problem. Where I have a problem is when the FCC comes in and the FCC chairman says this. This is where I have a problem.
Frankly, when you see stuff like this, I mean, look, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. These companies can find ways to change conduct, to take action, frankly, on Kimmel, or there's going to be additional work for the FCC. Again, there's actions that we can take on licensed broadcasters, and frankly, I think that it's really sort of past time that a lot of these licensed broadcasters themselves push back on Comcast and Disney and say, listen, we are going to preempt. We are not going to run Kimmel anymore until you straighten this out, because we licensed broadcaster, are running the possibility of fines or license revocation from the FCC if we continue to run content that ends up being a pattern of news distortion. So,
whoa. Patterns of news distortion. So that's what we had going on during the Biden regime. Disinformation, misinformation, news distortion. Okay, one man's news distortion is another man's lies, is another man's truths. So I'm saying, why can't we work it out with the free market? Why do we have to use the weight of the government? Because pretty soon they're going to say, we don't like what Brannon Howse is saying about Islam or homosexuality, et cetera, on his 74 Christian stations that have the FCC license.
Well, and I think if he wouldn't have said anything, Brannon, it wouldn't be happening, because Disney and ABC would do nothing about it. So I'm going to take the other side here, because the FTC also watches over my pillow commercials, all kinds of stuff out there. And if you've got, for example, I'll give an example. When I was under the scrutiny of them, and I won, but it was I was one of the few products could say 100% made in the USA. So we had to show it to them that it wasn't false information. What Jimmy Kimmel did there, he always makes his jokes and stuff, but it was also a big lie. He made you believe it was a mega part of mega that did this horrific assassination. I think he crossed the line there, Brent. I get what you're saying is where should this governing body, but they're also Jimmy pushed the envelope for a long time. But when you're putting out, it's one thing to do make fun of Mike Lindell, do all this stuff and say Mike's got disinformation, basically saying I'm putting out disinformation. So he's saying that, which was a lie. I was putting out the truth. But he out and out lied, don't you agree, by him saying that they're trying to put out everything they can to show that it wasn't one of their own.
But isn't lying, isn't that part of your First Amendment right to lie? I mean, if lying is illegal, every politician is going to lose their job.
Well, you know what? I think what you have here is something evil reared its ugly head beyond anything. Remember, I've always told you back in the old day, our biggest advantage is evil is greedy. Okay? So by these people, most things Jimmy would have got away with it probably any other time anywhere. But it crossed the line when you have an assassination of a father, a husband, or whatever, and a person that stood for for the First Amendment, getting in conversation, getting in debate, what journalists should be doing. And I think because it crossed a line,
but isn't that for the company to decide? Isn't that for Disney?
Well, they're the ones that should have. I agree that they're the ones that should have the fear. And I do an example of my pillow. I had two employees. They were both hard lefties. One went on Facebook and went out in social media and actually even attacked me. Okay. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. and you know who it is, Charlie. It was an old friend of yours. And I fired him. I gave him so much line, going, you crossed the line here.
Yeah, but
because
that's you.
Represent,
that's a private
right? No,
company.
I understand. Then another one, same type of person. They never brought up a thing. They kept it off their social media. When Donald Trump won, they had to take a week off and cry their eyes out. But what I'm saying is, you're right. That was up to me. Now, but in this case, and I guess what you're saying is you shouldn't be able to draw just because in this case it's Disney and ABC wouldn't have done a thing. I really think that the FTC, how do you know, Brandon, what are they there for anyway?
Well, now, wait, but
here's what I'm saying.
The FTC is the Federal Trade Commission, which comes after you. This is the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission.
Oh, that's what comes after me. The federal, what did I say?
You get the FTC coming after you, Federal Trade Commission. And this is the this is the FCC.
No, FCC is what I meant before. This is the televised stuff, right?
Right.
This is television. Yeah, that's what I meant. I get both. They all come after me, Brandon.
Federal Trade Commission. Everybody comes after you. But Federal Trade Commission, they go and they go after people that they don't think are making legitimate claims in their broadcasting and their print for advertising.
For the podcast.
But Federal Communication Commission gives licenses. Right.
Right.
And so what I'm saying is, how are we going to say anything if the next administration comes in and says, and I'm talking FCC now, Federal Trade Commission. Federal Communications Commission, FCC, Federal Communication Commission. They come in and the next administration say, Brannon Howse will not stop talking about Islam and jihad and the LGBTQ community, and that's Islamophobia, that's homophobia. This is not in the public interest. And we want the station to kick him off. And if that station is kicking him off, we're taking their license.
Well, then I'd have to ask you, what are they there for in the first place? What's the FCC there for? Aren't they, if they're giving you a license, don't they have guidelines you're supposed to stay within that were set up a long time ago that we have to follow? Now, the same people that are going to end up making regulations for AI, and you and I talked about this 4 years ago, these are, whoever's making them regulations, they better be voted in by the people and not selected and with evil. My question to you, Brandon, is, in this case, if they're a watchful eye, and maybe you can tell me, if the FCC gives you a license, maybe Jimmy Kimmel kept violating or pushing the envelope, and this time it went too far. I mean, is that the case here? Do you know the case? I know what you're saying, but what is the purpose of them? They just give out licenses, or are there guidelines you have to follow?
I can show you right here. We go right here to the website, Federal Communications Commission, licensing information. You can search their database. Earlier today, we searched their database as to what is the definition of public interest. And what we learned is they make it really on a kind of a case-by-case basis, but they give a license to ABC, NBC, CBS, the terrestrial radio, terrestrial television, airwaves, not CNN, not cable, not internet. And the standard seems to be certain programs you have to put on, which is why you would see radio stations, a secular radio station, carrying a preacher on a Sunday morning. They have to do some community programming. It's why you would see a secular TV station carrying a preacher on TV on Sunday morning. So they have certain guidelines. They can't use obscenity. They can't be involved in obscenity.
Would they be the same
F word?
Okay, would they be the same people that regulate if you're a 501c3, or if you're a charity where you can't sell commercial products or whatever? Do they also?
Well, I think that would come under the IRS and maybe the Federal Trade Commission, but certainly the IRS is going to control.
Okay.
But what I'm saying is, how does the FCC come in here and say, well, Jimmy, you're lying, and so we're going to put weight on the stations that carry you to take your license? Well, again, they're going to come and say, you guys are involved in disinformation, you Christian conservative broadcasters. Now we're going to take your license.
But can you lie? Is that part of the thing? Can you lie like that? I mean, I mean, this was a very public lie by Jimmy.
Yes, but I don't think there's anything in the FCC regulations that said you can't have someone on that lies, because free speech involves people lying, and some people, they don't think they're lying.
Well, then I do
you
see
think
your
Jimmy
point.
Kimmel thought he was lying, or do you think he really believed what he said? And it really kind of comes down to
no. He was 100% lying. You know that. That's
no.
his
But do you
shtick.
think he believed it, or do you think he really knew he was lying?
Oh, he believed he was lying. He knows he was lying. He knows what the guy that assassinated him. All that stuff, information was pretty much out there before he started saying this. So if you know you're lying, if you know you're lying, maybe the FCC. But I agree with you on one thing. If you're saying, now I do say this. I'll ask you a question, Brannon, because I see what you're saying. If the FCC had not said that, do you think ABC and Disney or would have took him off the air?
No, isn't there also a big merger deal coming? So isn't there a big merger deal they need the government to go along with? So do we want the government using those kind of things to pressure companies into having the kind of programming they want?
It would be I guess it's like you just said, you can't swear, you can't do these certain things. I guess you'd have to sit there and look what the guidelines are, and if there's no guidelines in there, if there's no rules in there that you can absolutely lie about a national tragedy, a worldwide assassination, and you lie about it, so people that are watching your show, I mean, I don't know. I guess you'd have to see if it's not in that rule, Brannon.
Well, you go to the FCC website, and I just put in misinformation. Nothing came back. I put in lying. Nothing came back. I put in disinformation. Nothing came back. I mean, the government would be out of business. The government would be out of business if they had to stop lying.
Right. And I want to say a disclaimer here. Brandon's not saying this. I know him because Jimmy Kimmel bought him something and bought him a gift. Right, Brandon?
That's true. He bought me a vest, but that's not what I'm saying. And I don't like what Jimmy said, but I don't want to see conservatives slit their own throats on the First Amendment, particularly when, was it Charlie Kirk all about the First Amendment and the exchange of ideas and debating? Shouldn't we let the free market decide?
Well, Brandon, it comes back to, what you're saying there is this big thing that's out that just got exposed. One of the first things that pouring out of DC operation. It was code word
Arctic Frost.
Arctic Frost. My pillow and my banks were in there when this was an attack by the DOJ, everybody, the FBI, and 4 other government agencies. It's hey, go after these guys. So, they end up taking my phone. They debanked me, everything else. And for why? And, this is, I do see your point is where do you, they could sit and spin it all they want there. All these people, the Sidney Powells and the Rudys and everybody else on that list, they're all going to ruin our democracy because they're attacking they're putting out disinformation about our elections. That was their, they couldn't even really say what this is, it's all subject, but
even if you say, well, we don't, Mike Lindell, he's lying. Wait a minute. How do you know Mike Lindell's lying? What if Mike Lindell believes that is the truth?
I see what you're saying. What if Jimmy Kimmel actually believed that it was somebody there, which, as screwed up as Jimmy is, and he does need help. He does need to go through my recovery network to find Jesus. And remember, Brandon, when he said, you think Mike really prays for me? And I'm saying it right now. Yes, Jimmy, I do. You lost your job. Now's the time to reflect. I'm praying that you get in the Word and that you do find our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. But you're exactly, now I see your point. I'm going to agree with Brandon on this, that Jimmy could be that mentally unstable that he believed that, and then it's subjective. It's just, did he really believe it or not? Or was he lying? So
are we going to go around?
Kind of like Brandon. It's kind of like my defamation case. I 100% I believe everything I said because it was true. Do I believe that they were all criminals, including their lawyers? Absolutely. That's not subjective. I 100% believe that. You're not going to change my
so
mind.
Isn't the solution to the problem with Jimmy saying this is that if ABC or Sinclair or what's the company Nexstar, if they don't want that, that's their deal. Okay. Now look, I'm on Christian radio. They have standards. They have an FCC license, but they can also set their own standards. The FCC doesn't tell the Christian stations I'm on that Brannon Howse can't say the word CRAP on the air. They don't tell them that.
Okay.
But I don't say that because I don't talk like that on the air. But the stations that I'm with have a standard. So those stations can set their own standards. Now, if their standard is, hey, Jimmy, when someone dies, particularly someone who's assassinated, we have to be careful and show deference and respect. And so we have to have standards. And so you violated our standards. But first of all, are they in writing? Did you know that in advance? Number two, we don't like what you said, so we're going to suspend you for a while. Okay. Or we're going to fire you, whatever his contracts allow them to do. But the government coming in and saying, Jimmy, we have to put pressure on these stations to fire Jimmy because we don't like what he said. Well, we shouldn't say anything the next time around when it's Kamala next time saying we want Brannon Howse off the air because he talks about Islamophobia. He's an Islamophobic.
But Brannon, why did the FCC guy say that? He also said, which I read somewhere, he said he came forward and said that because they're an organization, the FCC, that is supposed to give the licenses to these stations, your ABCs of the world and your Disneys, and it makes them look bad if you got somebody out there doing that, and these stations
he says that they have to operate in the public interest, okay? And I heard Molly Hemingway from The Federalist, who I normally agree with, I heard her say today on Fox, well, these are licenses. You have to be involved in the public, promoting that which is in the public interest. Okay, that's a pretty subjective thing, because it used to be in the public interest, we thought, to preach morality and a Judeo-Christian worldview and to warn about threats. Well, the public interest another 10, 20 years from now or less, it's not in the public interest to hear someone expounding on Romans chapter 1 when it comes to same-sex marriage or whatever else, which, by the way, in Canada on their stations up there, you can't do that. If you're a Christian programmer going into Canada, you can read Romans 1, but you cannot add commentary on it, or you're in big trouble under hate crime laws. So here this week, we have Pam Bondi coming out saying, well, we have to have hate crime laws for people celebrating Kirk's assassination. That's disgusting. People do that. But you don't bring down the government on people for expressing disgusting ideas. We do for terroristic threats. But now we have the FCC saying the public interest, the public opinion. Well, wait a minute. Who defines that? Does that depend on the administration? Because here's his exact quote today.
Broadcasters are different than any other form of communication, including here. We're on cable right now. Fox News doesn't have an FCC license. CNN doesn't. But ABC, CBS, NBC, those broadcast stations do. And with that license comes a unique obligation to operate in the public interest. And over the years, the FCC walked away from enforcing that public interest obligation. I don't think we're better off as a country for it. But look, President Trump ran directly at these legacy broadcast outlets, and he exposed them to these market forces. And a lot of these affiliate groups said, to your point, we're tired of carrying this stuff. Late night shows, something's gone seriously awry there. They went from going for applause, from laugh lines to applause lines. They went from being court jesters that would make fun of everybody in power to being court clerics and enforcing a very narrow political ideology. And Nexstar, as you noted, stood up and said, look, we have the license and we don't want to run this anymore. We don't think it serves the interests of our community. Sinclair did the same thing. So there's more work to go, but I'm very glad to see that America's broadcasters are standing up to serve the interests of their community. We don't just have this progressive foie gras coming out from New York and Hollywood.
Okay, fine. Sinclair and Nexstar can do that. That's their right to have standards. But the FCC shouldn't be saying they can do this the hard way or the easy way, because you have to be in the public interest. We cannot find how they define the public interest. The public interest is you cannot criticize anyone on the left. You cannot criticize anyone on the
Right.
right. What is public interest? It seems like it's
That's
a political
the part
whim.
you're missing. That's the variable you're missing there, Brandon. I see your point. That would need to be, should have been more clarified a long time ago. I understand what you're saying, but he said it there. ABC, NBC, whatever you got, did it break anything, and why were they getting warned by the FCC? Well, answer me this, Brandon. Did those two that said they weren't going to air it? Well, here'd be another thing. Maybe not even government. You know, you have all these people on social media that are losing their jobs now because they said something so derogatory, and Charlie deserves it and that. Well, it would be like holding Facebook then accountable, or holding all these platforms accountable because they allowed it to even pop up out there.
Well, let me tell you what I asked Grok. Hey, Grok, what is the FCC's definition of public interest? Well, Grok says the Federal Communication Commission defines public interest as a core principle guiding its regulatory actions rooted in the Communications Act of 1934. The term is not explicitly defined in a single, precise way with the act, but it generally encompasses promoting the public access to diverse, reliable, and accessible communication services while fostering competition, innovation, and consumer protection. So, accessibility, ensuring universal access to communication services such as broadband and telecommunications, especially in undeserved or rural areas. Diversity, promoting a variety of viewpoints and content and media to reflect the needs of a diverse population. Competition, encouraging market competition to drive innovation, lower prices, and improve service quality. Consumer protection, safeguard consumers from unfair practices and ensuring transparency in communication services. Public safety, supporting reliable communication systems for emergency services and national security. So the bottom line is they don't really have what they define as public interest, in that we can't hurt someone's feelings. Now, if we as conservatives think that we're bolstering the First Amendment and free speech and freedom of religion by agreeing with this from the FCC standpoint or the government side, we got a big problem. The free market side, have at it. Nexstar, Sinclair, if you have your broadcasting standards and you don't want that, that's your choice. But nobody's going to be able to say anything in the next administration when they say, you conservatives, you're intolerant, you're homophobic, you're xenophobic, you're Islamophobic, you're not in the public interest, we're pulling your license. I think we're walking into a trap.
Well, you may be right. But how do you solve that? The FCC then should have stuff defined in there that's not defined, correct, Brandon?
Either that or the FCC says, hey, one of our goals is to have a diversification. And if you want to be diversified with a guy who has a show that is full of stupidity and not even funny, then that's great. That's pretty diverse. But, are we really going to outlaw free speech? Are we going to outlaw people saying dumb things? Are we going to outlaw people even saying hateful things? We know the Supreme Court's already ruled on the KKK and Nazi groups. What was it? Nazi group that wanted to march down the middle of a neighborhood of Jews. And I think the Supreme Court, I'll have to go look up the case, ruled, yeah, that's offensive. But in a free society, you know what you do? You fight back, you have more free speech. So here's what I would say. The private companies can do what they want. Now, when it comes to Jimmy, if the private companies want to keep him on the air, what I would say is we do what we're doing here. We explain to people why Jimmy Kimmel was wrong. And what I'll do here, Jimmy, you're welcome to come on my broadcast. We can go live so it can't be edited. I know your show is largely taped, but we'll go live so it can't be edited. And you can explain your position, your ideas, and we can debate. Don't you think that's what Charlie Kirk would be doing? Would be saying, hey, wait a minute, let's debate him.
Right. No, yeah, that's right. But and of course he never would. Would you make him do it inside of a claw machine?
I would make him do it while wearing your My Pillow pajamas. How about that?
Right. Well, Jim, I believe Jimmy's such a coward. He would be completely out of his shtick, so to speak, because I can't believe, when I was on there, Brannon, twice, and then that, I thought maybe there's some spark of a little bit of morality there in, deep down. I even told you that. And, but he just kept spewing out, even some of the attacks on me were so over the top evil and despicable. Especially that fake Mike. I read stuff about him and stuff that he said about me. The guy's disgusting.
And see, that's where libel. I think didn't President Trump sue some media outlet and get $16 million from them? Right.
Yep,
so why can we not let the free market system and the legal system deal with this? Why do we have the strong arm of the government putting pressure?
Well, then what is the FCC for? Then I think you'd have to really define that and say, why do we have them, and why are they giving out licenses to these people but not these?
That's right.
We would have to define that. And there's probably a lot of government 3-letter words that we need to be defined or maybe getting rid of altogether.
Yep. And here's what's the interesting thing. Terrestrial radio and terrestrial television is dying. So why are we spending so much time worried about what they're saying and doing? That's not the future anyway. Terrestrial radio and TV is nice and it's important. It's a segment of the broadcasting arm. But you and I know the bulk of people today are watching. They're not even watching that anymore. Right? So here's the thing. How long before they take this and then apply it to the internet?
Right.
Now we got a real problem.
Now you got a real problem. But before I get off, I want to say, Brannon, though, all that aside, everybody, I want to say this. This horrible assassination has manifested. I told my wife when this happened, I said, this is going to be the biggest revival ever. If it was, I said, what evil has overstepped its bounds. This wasn't just done by one person. All the hate and stuff that was spewed out and the brainwashing of these and actually what Charlie fought for, the colleges and the media and everybody putting stuff out. Oh, you're a fascist, you're a racist, and all this stuff. But you're seeing what's happening now. I watched last night all around the world, from Pakistan, Australia, London, and having these big revivals and stuff, and with for Charlie and for Jesus, the people coming to Jesus, I believe, and then all these people, Brannon, losing their jobs. In the big scheme of things, I think it would have been a lot more, but it didn't take too many to all of a sudden they lose their jobs because everybody's pointing at them saying, how could you say such a thing? And I think in the long run, it's going to be a good thing where you get rid of it. We didn't have this stuff. You go back 10 years. I mean, I don't think anyway, where now we have a big enough voice to kind of push back on it and say, you don't get to come into a restaurant and scream profanities without getting kicked out of the restaurant or you don't get, you know what I mean?
Yeah, the difference is between private institutions and the government.
I agree. Yeah, no, I agree. But I'm just saying, for as a whole now, I just think it's going to open these gates, as Charlie would say. It's a turning point in history where now we feel like the majority out there, where we feel have some control. When I see stuff on my social medias and people are saying these hateful, these crazy things, and then they're getting called out and losing their job. Kevin Sorbo put a little meme out. It said, you out there that are crying that you lost your job for something you said, Charlie lost his life for something he said. And, that's, there's the First Amendment right of free speech, but there's a line. Remember what we did at Lindell TV back in the day? We put out all our guidelines. You couldn't use God's name in vain.
Right.
And the media came out and said, that's not free speech. That's not free speech. Well, that was our rule, I think as long as, but I guess it's a good argument, and I think, I got to go. But
okay,
man,
before you go, are you running for anything?
I didn't even think of that. Before you got me. But yeah, you guys, we do have to look at what about when, you're out there and like you say, I'm thinking of running for governor of Minnesota, and I want to be able to say what I got to say about a lot of things.
And they may say, I'm sorry, you cannot file to run because we don't like what you stand for. It's not in the public interest for you to run.
Right. I know.
We got to be careful where that goes, right?
That's right.
Okay, mypillow.com. You guys are going to stay around, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We're here to stay, and you guys Hey, all you guys out there that have supported us, it was a miracle we've gotten through by losing our box stores, our shopping channel, attacked just by the government now. So you guys use that promo code B66, 800-894-6149. I'm going to tell you guys this special, all of our towels just came in, very limited quantity, but all the colors came in. 6-piece sets, $39.98. Normally $69.98. I know you guys have waited a couple months for that. The other big special we have, since we're our own bank, we have all our sheets. We're closing out our percale sheet lines, any size, any color. King's normally $119.98, $29.88. Once they're gone for good. You guys get them. And we also, remember, we have over $100. So all our big ticket items, if you spend over $100, if you buy a mattress, anything over $100, which ships for free. And if you buy $100 and more, I'm going to ship you promo code B66. If you buy over $100, I'm going to give you $120 in free digital gifts. And trust me, you're going to be amazed and blown away. So
Thank you, Mike.
Brannon.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank your audience. And you guys, thanks for my pillow's here to stay.
Good.
Most company in history.
Excellent. Be safe, my friend.
All right, thanks. Yeah.
Mike Lindell checking in tonight. Yeah, use that promo code B66 at mypillow.com. We'll be right back. You've seen some of them on Fox News, and now some of them are coming to the Worldview Weekend in Collierville, Tennessee. Friday night, October 3rd, Saturday, October 4th. Like Gordon Chang, an expert on China, as China is buying up a lot of our farmland and more. Then we're going to have the lead pollster of Rasmussen Polling, Mark Mitchell. Where are we headed with the midterms? What's the worldview of the average American? What values do they really believe in? And then Chris Martenson, he's an expert on the Great Reset as we head toward digital currency and social credit scores. Sidney Powell, a lot of you know who that is. Alex Newman, Dr. Andy Woods on Israel and the Middle East. And Hedieh Mirahmadi, she was inside the government and even met with people like Gaddafi. She's going to talk about the Middle East. All the details are available, and to get your tickets at worldviewstore.com. That's worldviewstore.com. Again, tell your family and friends, worldviewstore.com. Join me now is Hedieh Mirahmadi. She's going to be with us at our Worldview Weekend coming up Friday night, October 3rd, Saturday, October 4th. Kash Patel testified this week, and he used a very interesting phrase. I want you to listen to it, and then we're going to bring her in to discuss what he said. And I think it'll apply to really how we deal with, quote, extremists, end quote, in the Islamic world and their growing numbers, and how can you identify them and what is causing them to grow. Listen to Kash Patel earlier this week.
Counterterrorism work, cyber attacks, and foreign adversaries are something the FBI must never sleep on, and we are not sleeping. In the counterintelligence space alone, this year to date, 30% increase in counterintelligence arrests from the DPRK, Russia, Iran, and China. And I want the American people to know, in this setting, there's a lot of work that the brave men and women in the FBI are doing we just can't get into, but they don't stop. Our cyber threats, ransomware attacks, those harming our children online. We have nearly a 20% increase in indictments arrests in 7 months alone this year. We're going after those that harm our malware, infrastructure systems, telecom systems, and energy structure. Combating SALT and Vault Typhoons are just a little bit of the examples we're doing. Maybe most importantly, under the counterterrorism and domestic terrorism umbrella, are nihilist, violent extremists, and those that label themselves 764, who wish to go online and convince children to maim and mutilate themselves and commit suicide. And we are producing record numbers of arrests under that umbrella organization. We even stopped an individual in the 764 network who wanted to conspire to kill an adolescent girl. He is now in custody. Transparency remains one of my main...
All right, let's stop right there. Nihilistic, violent extremist, nihilistic. Life has no ultimate meaning or purpose. Nihilism. Life has no ultimate meaning or purpose, particularly if you evolve from pond scum versus being created by an all-knowing God who breathed into you and gave you a soul, a spirit that will live forever and be judged. The alternative is, this is all a mistake. We just came about by random choice of billions of mutations. There is no order. There is no creator. There is no judgment day. Life has no meaning, nihilistic or nihilism. Then you add the nihilism to violent extremism. Wow. Speak to this, please, will you?
So if you don't mind, I'm going to take your audience back a little bit in time so we understand the evolution of this term. In the mid-90s, when I started this research, so I've been involved in the intervention of radicalized youth, especially in Islam, since the 90s. So in the beginning, we were looking for Muslims willing to kill themselves for jihad, whether they were doing it domestically or they were going overseas. They were motivated by their cultural religious heritage within Islam. Fast forward to after 9/11 and the rise of ISIS, so we're talking around 2014 or 2015, we suddenly saw that there were radicalized American kids going over to fight overseas, no nexus to Islam whatsoever, radicalized and indoctrinated into Islam within as short as 6 weeks, going over and blowing themselves up in Syria. There were girls from Idaho, Missouri, deciding to become ISIS brides, also no nexus to Islam, deciding to convert to Islam, go over and become a Syrian ISIS bride. And this phenomena scared us because we could not track and identify them based on the communities they were a part of like we could even during the time of 9/11 and the rise of Al-Qaeda. So ISIS, basically, these jihadi groups are always one step ahead of us. So fast forward to today, and when I look at people like Tyler Robinson and some of these other trans kids, we know there is a red-green alliance. And I texted you saying, I think there's a jihadi nexus to this. And so when I heard Cash bring up this term, because I haven't been involved in the research in this field for a couple of years, since I came to Christ, and I realized that this is now the term that they're using to bucketing the jihadi groups, the anti-American, anti-establishment groups, the Marxist groups, the violent trans groups like you talked about with Shahram, with the Queer Alliance of Salt Lake City. The NVE bucket is the way they're looking to identify these groups and to study them basically as a cohesive network. And the scary part about it is they're not cohesive in the sense that their ideologies range from such a broad spectrum that it really worries me how we're going to address this radicalization threat. Because we're no longer looking for just jihadis, but they're learning from jihadi methodology, if that makes sense.
Oh, it does make sense. So we should look for jihadis among white Caucasian kids, transgender kids. So in other words, the Islamists are now radicalizing our own.
Yes.
And which makes it very hard to find them. And then it makes people assume, the shooter was just a trans guy or pro-trans. How do we know there wasn't some Islamic influence? And maybe he was just a really pro-trans guy. That still doesn't mean he wasn't equipped and pushed to it by jihadis, correct?
Exactly. And
or
so
funded, right?
Funded. So the reason that these jihadis are always one step ahead of us is in ISIS, they converted them. So they converted them. So before they went overseas, we could identify them because of their Muslim rhetoric. So I was at FBI headquarters. I was asked to profile some of these individuals in which we had Guardian and investigation leads on. And I could tell by what they were saying when they had entered Islam. So
no, wait, stop you there. Saying on social media, saying in conversations that were captured, how are you seeing what they were saying?
Well, I don't want to go into too much detail, but the FBI has a lot more than social media at its disposal. So it was all sorts of conversations that had occurred. These were open investigations. And so I was looking for Islamic doctrine. I was looking for Islamic terminology. These guys are now morphed. They're one step ahead of us. They don't care whether they become Muslims. So we can't even look for that identifying factor.
Okay, stop right there. So the Islamists are Iran, are Qatar. They don't care if they become Islamist.
Exactly.
Is anyone else in the media out here saying this?
So the place I found it, interestingly enough, was my old colleagues. So I did the research based on people I knew that study what we call violent extremism. So for people who don't know where that terminology came from, it was basically a all of government approach under Obama that we didn't want to target Muslims. It was the same thing we used. I mean, it's government wide. it is a terminology to avoid the implication of Islam. And so we built this network of like resources and threat management, threat assessment teams that could identify people engaged in terrorism or acts of violence that were motivated by a variety of factors. That wasn't just Islam. So that's why they're still using that term. And in this context, it turns out to be very useful because these guys are not becoming Muslim. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So they're not becoming Muslims, and yet the Muslims aren't not even probably trying to convert them. Is that what I'm hearing?
Exactly. So in a lot of circumstances, they don't even bother to convert them. If they have an affinity to Islam, then fine. But what they all have in common is the hatred of the Judeo-Christian foundation of this country, of capitalism, of free society. They see it as us versus them. Remember, that was always Al-Qaeda's narrative, us versus them. So what they've done is taken all of these disenfranchised, broken trans homosexual kids, the Marxists, all these groups, and lumped them with us versus them, and them being the Judeo-Christian establishment foundation of this society.
So if you have a red-green axis, the red being the Marxist, the green being the Islamist, and if you have China, if you have other Marxist groups pumping money into the U.S. to create chaos, to pervert our kids, to change our kids, drugs, the CCP is involved in drugs, pumping fentanyl and everything in here, right? And of course, when you get involved in drugs, heavy drinking, pretty soon you do pornography.
CSAM. You'll hear Cash talked about CSAM, which is the sexual exploitation and abuse material, child sexual exploitation material.
Tell me more.
CSAM.
Tell me more about that.
So there's this nexus that the experts are discovering, and Cash referred to it as a 4.5-hour testimony. It took a long time to get through it. But so the nexus is between terrorist exploitation content, violence, the jihadi, the Hitler literature, the jihadi literature, the ISIS attacks, which is basically, we don't like them, they are not of us, we slit their throats. Very similar to Hitler. So during Biden, they wanted to define this, and they still continue to try to do this as right-wing extremism because it's glorifying Hitler. They're not glorifying Hitler's anti-Semitic approach. They're glorifying his violence, his ability to subjugate a society. So they're taking figures like Hitler and like Osama bin Laden and other ISIS fighters to glorify the violence aspect, combining this with the satanic and the occult, the rituals of blood cutting, cutting symbols. Cash refers to that as the 764 group. There's also the O9A, the Nine Angles group, and they are combining the sexual exploitation of minors, identifying them through gaming platforms like Discord and other online chats, with the violence. Because you said something really important on your interview with Sharam about searing the consciousness. Yeah. And that's really what they're doing.
Okay, so why do they want to bring in sexual exploitation of minors? Why are they trying? Why is that? Why not have them involved in sexual activity with, people that are also their own age? Why do they have to get them involved with children?
Well, I think there's something debase about it. And again, I'm going to go back to the jihadi literature about, the pedophilia and the engaging of minors in sexual acts, right? We see them we see this happening in the jihadi world, in the Muslim world generally, about marrying minors, 9 years old, 11 years old. I've watched some horrific interviews from Qatar and the UAE about grown men, 45 years old, having a 9-year-old bride. There's something about the debaseness of it, the degradation of the human soul to engage in these kind of acts, so that the reason they're called nihilists is because at the very end, the bulwarks that prevent a person that's radicalized from turning to violence and valuing their life are eliminated. When nothing has value, the most sacred of your society, the children, don't have value, then life itself has no value. Why do these people commit murder indiscriminately? Because life has no value. Because God isn't in their lives. There is no morality code. Without God, There is no code of morality.
In the book Hitler's Cross, which I referenced the other night, about the acts of brutality and murder that the Hitler and Himmler would have the SS troops do in order to break them away from the family and make them come to the SS for all of their emotional support and community. They'd have cut them away from hearth and home by having them involved in extreme violence and murder, searing their conscience and breaking them away from the tradition of their church and their family, thus making them cohesive with others who had gone through this same thing. It's like creating a secret society, really. And
They are secret societies.
Exactly. And here's what Lutzer writes. To transform the men into non-thinking, unfeeling machines, Himmler, the head of the SS, needed to indoctrinate them into a secret society of their own.
Exactly. And so what I'm really worried about, and we've talked about the scholar Raymond Ibrahim, he did a really great podcast on this subject. What worries me is that when we define this all as left, we are basically legitimizing these very deviant behaviors. And he traces it back actually to the legitimization of homosexuality, which was always thought in civilized culture as being deviant. It's something the Bible has talked about 2,000 years ago, even before that, 3,000 years ago in the books of Moses. The problem is when you start to just bucket this as left, then this particular NVE group makes it left versus right, when in actuality, what it really should be is civilized society against deviance. So we should, and I don't know if this is even possible, we should be able to come together and say, this is wrong. This is anti-American. This is anti-civilization. This is anti-society. And we have to work together. Unfortunately, I don't know if our country could come back from the brink. And the longer this remains a left versus right issue, it's going to tear our country apart. Because if you recall, and we have to be wary of this, because if you recall, we just came out of the Biden administration. They were not calling them NVs. They were calling them RMVs, which is racially motivated violent extremism. So they took the cases of the guys, in these groups, and guys and girls looking at Hitler literature and calling them white supremacists, because they didn't want to acknowledge they were looking at them to glorify the violence like you just discussed and kind of searing the human soul. They wanted to describe them as white supremacists, and they were pushing domestic terrorism laws. Those laws did not pass. They have historically not passed because the majority of Congress understands if we pass domestic terrorism laws, the first people it's going to go after are whites. And there is a danger for us to think that, okay, we want domestic terrorism laws now that we have Trump, because 3 years from now, we may not have a Trump and we may have a Biden again.
Yeah.
A version of that again, where those laws will be turned against us.
Which is why I'm very concerned about the chairman of the Federal Communications Commission, FCC, talking about Jimmy Kimmel's words and this is not in the public interest and all this. Because, as I said on radio today, how long before the next FCC director is saying what Brannon Howse is saying on his 74 Christian terrestrial stations is not in the public interest or good for the community? We need to base it on, is the speech illegal? Is it terroristic threats? Okay. If it's not illegal speech, then you can counter it with more free speech. If the corporations of America, Sinclair, Nexstar, if they don't want it on their platform, that's their choice to have broadcasting standards of their own. But we don't need the government coming in and saying it's not in the public interest to have Jimmy saying these things right now. Well, is it going to be in the public interest when I'm describing the horrors of Islam after October 7th? Right? So
exactly.
This is a double-edged sword. And that's why I get really upset with the MAGA folks, because some of them, not all of them, because they only see things through the lens of the Trump administration and the MAGA agenda, not through the lens of how is this emotionalism, How is this politicalism? How is this going to be a double-edged sword in the next administration? Well, you guys had no problem canceling Jimmy Kimmel and using the government to do it when he said something about your guy. Now we got to get rid of Brannon Howse on terrestrial radio because he's saying something against a very prominent, respected imam, right?
We just went through this. I mean, people should have a long enough memory to recognize that the Biden administration was going after J6 and grandmothers, that were attending that were outside the Capitol taking pictures because they called us white supremacists. They called us racially motivated violent extremism, even though most of the people weren't even white. We have to remember the FBI memo going after radical Catholics. We don't want to criminalize speech. Look at what Tommy Robinson's doing out in England. Why are people getting arrested for praying outside of abortion centers? Because they're classifying Christian doctrine. I mean, the Bible is hate speech to those who are perishing. It's foolishness. So we don't want to criminalize speech. And I'm glad you've constantly pointed out what A.G. Bondi's doing in that interview, talking about criminalizing hate speech and stopping hate speech. We don't do that in America. We criminalize violence.
Yes.
So the Brandenburg test in the Constitution is your speech inciting imminent violence?
That's right.
Are you advocating violence against a group? That is a criminal act that we prosecute, but we don't want to prosecute just ugly speech.
100%. Now, I want to keep going on this violence. So violence, they study Osama bin Laden, they study Hitler. Then you add the occult in, whether it's reincarnation. You could die in this process. It doesn't matter. You'll come back in the next life. Or sacrifices. These are you're offering up sacrifice. And we know in the case of the Nazis, Hitler, as a young man, wrote a play about sacrificing people under the oaks, right? It was an occultic ritual to the Babylonian gods of human sacrifice. And that's why people like Dr. Mark Musser did the excellent book, Nazi Ecology, saying the Nazi ecology was largely a green agenda where the Jews could be sacrificed for the better of the environment. And we know for a fact that those SS troops were being told about reincarnation. You're giving the Jews a chance to come back in something better, but their kosher diets, their bloodletting, this is all damaging to the environment and Mother Earth. And there's so many parallels. So you add the violence, the occult aspects of it versus the practitioner versus the one they're practicing it on. Then the exploitation, the sexual exploitation, whether it's minors or whether it's same sex and LGBTQ to sever the conscience. Now let's add in, what is the ultimate goal? Lutzer goes on to say that he assured them, Himmler, that a master race was developing. And if the inferior races stood in their way, the scientific belief in the survival of the fittest dictated that these races had to be exterminated. Indeed, they were on a divine mission to create a new man and could only do so if these subhumans were prevented from multiplying and populating the earth. To refuse an order was not even to enter their minds. The mystical rituals bonded them to the conviction that they were all members of the elect. So they were going to create a master race. Nietzsche's Superman, Charles Darwin's,
social Darwinism.
Totally. The select races. What then would these guys, if you have violence, occult, sexual exploitation, what is their ultimate goal? What is their ultimate society? Obviously free of Christians, free of Jews, right?
Well, look at the global elite network, right? So we've been talking about this global network at the higher scale, the elite scale. So what are their goals? It is the demise of Western civilization, to build this kind of satanic, anti-God, demonic force that exterminates. This is not about a race. This is not about white people. This is about the extermination of the people of God. And this is throughout the literature. So I've been reading from experts, my former colleagues, and they all mention that they're trying to destroy the foundations of Western society and civilization. Now, the jihadis think they're going to bring in Islam. So they're just, working together for this demise of the Judeo-Christian values. And I firmly believe the Muslims think that the LGBT and the other groups, the Marxist groups, are just fodder for hellfire. They're just, using them to achieve what they want, and then they're just going to supplant Islam. But together, these two forces just want the destruction of everything America represents today. That's why I'm really hoping and praying this doesn't stay a left-right thing. It has to be an American thing against what's anti-American. And stop legitimizing these movements as part of like progressive ideology. They're demonic and they're anti-American and they're anti-establishment. The non-Christians don't want to talk about good versus evil or the demonic, but you can talk about anti-establishment and being anti-American, anti-capitalism, anti-freedom for all the values and the respect for society. Just the ability to counter violence, that abject violence is unacceptable. Political violence is unacceptable. I really pray that that's where we will eventually be able to come together, but it's not entirely clear.
We know that in Hitler's time, the objective was the elimination of the Jews. And the Grand Mufti of Palestine, a Muslim Brotherhood guy, was given an apartment in Berlin, given the airwaves. They translated Hitler's Mein Kampf, my struggle, into my jihad. We know the PLO, Palestinian Liberation Organization, in the early 2000s were still distributing that to their people in their language. So when they were done exterminating the Jews in Europe, Hitler said, we'll go over to Palestine, Philistine, the false name, and we will exterminate the Jews there. And of course, they never got that far. But the Grand Mufti was calling them, and he recruited tens of thousands of Muslims to wear the Nazi uniform that we have pictures of, wearing the sword of Islam with the Nazi symbols on their uniforms, on their collars. We have the black and white photos of this. And their objective was the murder of Jews. But in the process, we know that Hitler was also taking down the institution of the church, that they dissolved the churches, their church denominations, and they united under the Reich bishop. They removed the Bible, put in Mein Kampf. They took down the cross, put up a swastika. They were merging their so-called Christianity, much of them who were into replacement theology already, had long done away with the Jews and were already buying into some form of anti-Semitism. And they merged it with the Nazism. And this is, of course, why you have some of them who were parading around with, at their church denominations, the cross with the swastika. But their goal was the destruction of the church, the real church, as you will, Bible-believing churches, with destruction of the Jews. How is that any different? The Jews are being targeted, practicing Jews, real Jews that really believe in Judaism are being targeted. Christians are being slaughtered in their churches, in their worship services, right? A trans gal kills Christian kids at a Christian school in Nashville and Christian teachers. So how is this really any different? You're on a mission and you're partnering with people that either hate the Jews or they hate the Christians or they hate both. They may not all be uniting in their hatred of the Christians. They may not all be uniting in their hatred of the Jews. One may hate the Christians over the Jews. One may hate the Jews over the Christians. But isn't it pretty obvious to you and me that Islam and Marxism are uniting for the destruction of Christianity and Judaism, particularly when you realize that many of them believe the source of all suffering and oppression is Christianity or the Judeo-Christian ethic? So isn't the agenda really, Satan is really doing the same thing he was doing with Hitler and the Nazis? He's doing it again. It's just a different form, and now it seems to be global.
Yeah, it's brilliant analysis. Nothing new under the sun. And that's why these groups like O9A and 764 are looking at Hitler literature. So it's not because this is focused just on the Jews, it's focused on Judeo-Christian society writ large. And I'm happy to report that there are scholars out there that are looking at this and identifying it and recognizing it. And I'm sure the Trump administration is going to pour a whole bunch of money into investigating these groups. I see already, projects that are underway and papers that have been written. So mind you, we now have this giant shift from Biden's DOJ and all of those funding mechanisms that we're going towards, and I bring a lot of those up in my book, We're going after the RMVEs, the white supremacists, and now all of those resources and grant projects now need to shift to go after the NVEs. And so that becomes the challenge in the administration reformatting itself to address the new threat. And hopefully we don't end up 3 years from now, back at square one. That's just the way our patterns of government go.
So you provided us with this slide. You want to talk about this slide?
So back in 2016, when I was at the FBI, we were developing intervention models. And the premise was that you needed to partner with the community. If you wanted to intervene in a radicalized individual or potentially radicalized a person, you needed the community's help. So community groups, YMCA, schools, you needed all kinds of people to be willing to fight this threat together. So this graphic that I brought up for you is identifying the risk factors. And basically, as this threat morphs, these risk factors, the bullet points within the risk factors can change. But the buckets remain the same. And the idea is these circles overlap because each of these radicalized persons has varying degrees of each of these problems. And our goal is to identify through evidence-based clinical tools when a person reaches a level that is either actionable to violence that needs to be reported to law enforcement or that needs some other intervention tools that are designed to help in each of those circles.
So going forward, what do you see if this trajectory stays the same? What do you see happening next?
So I did some research on where the FBI is in the program. So unfortunately, the program I was a part of was stymied by a Muslim that was over at DOJ that wouldn't approve our policy, and then later was curtailed. Yeah, because everybody was screaming Islamophobia, you're targeting Muslims. And then later, Russiagate is what closed down the program because no policy was implemented during that time during the Russia investigation. So I've been out of the game for a couple of years. I looked online to see what's going on with the program, and there are threat assessment and threat management tools that the FBI is doing in coordination with DHS, Department of Homeland Security. I'm not sure how robust they are. I don't know how many people are participating, but at the end of the day, we need to intervene. And there needs to be a mechanism whereby the community can report these threats to multidisciplinary teams, psychologists, school resource officers, imams, or people that can address the ideological threat, and eventually and concurrently with local law enforcement and the FBI. And without those multidisciplinary teams and a more robust intervention model, I don't know how bad this violence is going to get. It's anybody's guess how, because this is so much bigger than converting people to Islam. I really want your audience to understand how dangerous this threat is when you can glorify violence in people by using the jihadi literature and the Hitler literature without telling them, you don't have to hate a particular segment of society, you just have to hate all of society that doesn't agree with you. So you don't have to convert to Islam. We don't care if you convert to Islam, but you have to adhere to these ideologies, these practices and this membership in these kind of occult groups. It provides a sense of belonging for these people. It provides a sense of thrill, this hero culture that a lot of people look at. Luigi Mangione. I mean, is that a debased human being who thinks that his personal grievance allows him to take a life, and the people that glorify him for taking that life? It is that subculture that we're dealing with that is not recognizable by a particular people or group.
That's the guy that took the life of the healthcare CEO.
Exactly.
Just to remind everybody. So if you had to guess at this point, was this kid being radicalized by a collection of people that would include perhaps influence from Islam?
Absolutely. 100%. Well, I mean, your best evidence was what you and Sharon covered in the Queer Alliance. It's run by an Iranian girl. So to what extent are we going to hear about the Iranian funding that movement? How involved? Because when I looked into her, there was associations with her being awarded by the State Department, by the UN for her work. Yes. So we already see the nexus. It's directly connected to him if he was part of that group. And I think that people will start to realize that, and so it's not going to be politically correct to try to bring in the Islamists, because the national Islamic organizations like CARE are going to be like, don't you dare associate us with this stuff because the guy's not Muslim. That doesn't matter. It's the influence of the ideology on the mindset of these criminals.
Do you believe that we are going to continue to see attacks on conservatives and Christians, including more murders? And do you think at some point it behooves them to also make sure that we see the elimination of some people on the left so that you can get them out into the streets fighting each other?
Yeah. Over 400 attacks on Christians in 2024 alone. One of the congressmen reported that during Cash's hearing. 500 on Catholics since 2020. I think that number is going to just continue to rise. So I know in the communities I'm a part of, we have a big event coming up. You and I have a big event coming up. What is our first thought? Okay, what are we doing about security? What are we doing about whether we're attacked? And how are, God forbid, some of those interactions going to play out? Who's going to be the initial aggressor? Who's going to be identified as the aggressor so that it says, oh, well, these right-wing groups are now attacking the trans kids. It's going to be, how does it play out in the media, and how does that vary from the actual facts? I think we're in a very dangerous time. We're in a very dangerous time in this country.
And isn't that part of the goal, is to shut down free speech? So if people become afraid to hold events, don't the Marxists, the Islamists, and those that are against the principles of our republic that include free speech, freedom of religion, the right to public assembly, those very rights start to decrease. And then when people become afraid, and we saw this last Friday night when I went on and did man on the street interviews in Memphis, what do you think of President Trump sending the National Guard into Memphis? As I've told this audience, I don't know if you heard me, I said that there are people that had very strong opinions one way or the other. Some of them very strong, like laced with four-letter words, strong opinions. And I said, aside from the cursing, I want to get this on camera. I'm looking for people with strong opinions on all sides on this. Let's roll the camera, guys, and grab this. And that's when they would say, oh, no. I can't be on camera saying this. Well, why not? You did a perfect job articulating your point. Yeah, but I might lose my job. I might lose friends. I might lose customers, clients. And to me, what I came away with Friday night with those interviews was, the more that people are attacked on the right, the middle, the left, and are murdered or shut down, and now Jimmy Kimmel shut down, the more, and I'm not a Jimmy Kimmel fan, I don't like what he said. I think it's a matter of the free market deciding it. I don't think the government should be behind shutting people down like this, because he didn't say anything illegal. He didn't cite anybody. So the more we see people being canceled or eliminated, the more people are going to be afraid to speak. And when you stop practicing free speech, when you stop valuing free speech, more then the Islamists, the Marxists, the globalists, these people then win. They then win, because we no longer think, oh, wow, I'm not alone. There's a lot of people that believe the way Hedieh and Brannon Howse believe. Well, pretty soon you won't know that, because they're all quiet, right? And that's what we saw in communist countries. There'd be people spill into the street when they thought there was going to be the opportunity to overthrow the communist regime, and people would show up in the streets, like in Hungary, and people would say, what are you doing out here? I thought you were a communist. No, I'm not a communist. I just had to act like one to get along to go along. I hate communism. But their fellow citizens thought they were diehard communists. And pretty soon you think you're the minority. And that's how they win.
Right. And I remember J.D. Vance's speech to England criticizing them for regulating social media posts of people that were just talking about what's going on in their country. We don't want to get to that place. We don't want to stop people from dialoguing. I mean, we would be dishonoring Charlie's legacy by doing that. I mean, we want to demonstrate that you kill Charlie, you create a million Charlies. We're all Charlie Kirk. You know, we want to light the inferno of young people and patriots and people saying, no, we don't want less speech, we want more. But the Islamists, they're always one step ahead of us, because before they decide, before they used to try to kill Americans just abjectly on the street, identifying themselves, Allah Akbar, and then putting up a flag. But now they're thinking to themselves, wait a minute, why don't we just let the Americans kill each other? And we're really, really at the verge of that tipping point where Americans are at a place where we're willing to kill each other over these issues, not realizing that the impetus has been provided by these jihadi groups.
And isn't that what we saw in the Barack Obama, Michelle Obama movie, Leave the World Behind? The guy's in the truck and he tells the other guy, they want us killing each other. Remember that line in the movie?
Yes, exactly. And that's what, and when we used to war game in the government, I even have slide presentations about it. The biggest threat that Americans face is civil war, because that's really what could destroy our country, because of we have an armed population. It would just be a massacre. And I'm really praying there's more like Fettermans out there who will see through this madness and say, wait a minute, people on the left will be like, wait a minute, this isn't what I represent. This isn't what I want for this country. I don't want a communist. I don't want anti-capitalism. I want a free society. I want what my founding fathers want, whether I'm a Christian or a Hindu or a Buddhist. It's believing in what America stands for and our founding principles, and being willing to fight for that across party lines.
Are you, in closing, are you shocked today that there's not many people saying what you and I are saying about what the government's leaning on ABC, Disney, when it comes to Jimmy Kimmel? Are you shocked there are not more conservatives saying, constitutionalists saying what I'm saying tonight? Because I'm kind of disappointed that people are going along with this.
Yeah, it's really disturbing. I think it's a spirit of vengeance. People want revenge and are not thinking of the big picture and how destructive that could be when the shoe was on the other foot. I mean, the shoe was on the other foot in less than a year ago. So I don't know why people have such short memories. How dangerous it is when we weaponize the federal government. We don't want to be weaponizing the federal government.
And, it's going to make the case for, well, when the left is in power, they want to take down the right. When the right's in power, they want to take down the left. So you know what? Maybe what we should just do is go to a neutral system. Let's just turn it over to AI. Let's turn more of this over to AI. No, I'm not kidding. I think we're going to see more and more push for AI to write legislation, AI to make judicial decisions. And this is what some of my friends who are experts on technocracy are saying. You see what I'm saying?
But wait a minute. But AI is biased. So
that's right.
Every time I do an AI investigation of these violent extremism groups, they caveat it as these are actually right-wing groups. These are actually RMD.
I agree. No, I agree. So I agree. I'm just saying.
Manipulate the content.
I agree 100%. But I would not be shocked if they're not using the left-right conflict to say, but we can go to another system, because that's what Peter Thiel is saying. If the choice is Antichrist or Armageddon, maybe there's a third option. And maybe their third option is a system that they promise us will be neutral. Well, I don't buy it, but I wonder how many people are going to increasingly buy it, right? Because
and our Bible promises people will buy it.
What's that?
Our Bible promises people are going to buy it.
Yes, they will. Yes, they will. Well, I'm glad that you see it so clearly, because today I'm distressed about what's going on with our government leaning on ABC and ABC and Disney over Kimmel. Although, again, I'm not pleased with what Kimmel said, but hey, why are we shutting down free speech all in the name of Charlie Kirk? It seems to be using his name to actually destroy the thing he stood for.
Exactly. You're absolutely right.
resurrectministry.com. And she'll be with us here Friday night, October 3rd, Saturday, October 4th. She'll be speaking at our banquet on Thursday night. I think we got headed to 75 people registered for that banquet already. And I've got my grand piano and piano player. We'll do a few numbers, some classic hymns. We had a rehearsal yesterday for that. And I think we have a classical guitar player who's going to come in, who's won a bunch of awards, and he's going to join us in that. And then we'll hear a great keynote presentation by Hedieh. And that's if you are part of that Thursday night. And then she'll be speaking on Friday night as well. And so we have a wonderful lineup. Come join us in person here in very, very safe Collierville, Tennessee.
I was just going to say, are you going to tell everybody they're going to be safe?
Well, it's safe right now, but I can't promise you anything. Like my wife said, Brandon, if they want you dead, they'll kill you. My wife's pretty much like, it is what it is. If they want you dead, they're going to kill you. I'm like,
our days are numbered.
That's what she said. That's right. So we're having conversations about all this, and we're looking at all the security around Charlie Kirk, and what good did that do?
Right.
So we've gone from like, oh, wow, we have to ramp up all this security to, okay, we need security, but I'm not so sure that we can promise anyone that nothing's going to happen. And I said to my wife today, you know what's interesting, babe? You and I started Worldview Weekends in February of 1993, held 300 Worldview Weekends around the country. And now today, if you are a public speaker, if you are at all controversial, when you get up to speak, you have no guarantee that someone is not going to get up on the stage and stab you like they did to the guy that got his eye.
Christian.
Who?
The Assyrian Christian that was gunned down in Europe. That was stabbed in Europe.
Or the guy in New York a couple years ago. The guy that went undercover for so many years because he wrote about Islam. What was his name? And they got him in the eye.
Salman Rushdie?
Salman Rushdie, right.
Yes.
Yeah, right.
Theo Van Gogh.
So the guy jumped on the stage and slit his throat, and if a doctor hadn't have been there, he wouldn't have survived, right? So when you get up and speak today, you have no guarantee that someone's not going to jump on the stage and slit your throat. You have no guarantee someone's not going to pull out a gun and shoot you. And I said to my wife, these are the facts today. Charlie Kirk was surrounded by security, and they could not stop it, okay? So if someone's intent on killing you, they're going to kill you. And so anyone attending a conference, an event of any kind, has got to decide, is free speech and our principles worth laying down our life for? While the chance of being killed or assaulted may be statistically very, very low, are you willing to take that chance? If so, go to an event. But nobody can guarantee 100% safety today. I'm sorry.
Absolutely. And I'd also like to advise people to have situational awareness. As former law enforcement, I will tell you, look around, watch your six. Just know your exit ways, know suspicious people, say something, do something, so if you see somebody walk in with a suspicious backpack, think about how many people were videotaping this guy on the roof. Why didn't somebody start screaming, man on the roof, and disrupt the conference? So we have to be willing to also speak up and to all be citizens, a citizen army that's aware and willing to say something. Just start screaming, whatever it takes, so people also have to do their part to help keep themselves safe.
100%. resurrectministry.com. Great interview. We learned a lot tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Brannon, for having me.
Look forward to having you here in just a few weeks. It's going to be awesome. Thank you. God bless you. Folks, do you appreciate what we're doing here? That was an amazing conversation. You know what? We could keep it really shallow. We could do the right, left, keep it really shallow, have a bigger audience, and make more money. Because the bigger the audience, the more advertising, the more sales. But you know what? I'm tired of that. I've never been into that. You guys know that, right? And I said to one of my friends today, talk radio in America has largely become not about informing people, but about entertaining them and distracting them from the real issues. Entertaining them and distracting them. So if you want to be entertained, you've come to the wrong place. Although I think at times we're very entertaining, don't you, Logan? But if you want to be educated, this is what we do. By having intentional conversations with people like we just did in order to get to the root of the issues and understand the times. And I am not marketing and programming to the masses because the average person in America, I'm sorry, is not interested in learning and being discerning and being a workman, rightfully dividing the word of truth. We are programming to a select group of people, and you're one of them. And if you appreciate the intentional programming we do here, we need your support. So please go to worldviewfoundation.com. Help us continue to push out the programming. Worldviewfoundation.com. Thank you for that. We'll be right back after this break.
I'll tell you one little quick story. We had a Worldview Weekend client who lived in California, lost their house. Very wealthy guy. He didn't use Bitcoin. He came over here, drove to Arizona with $286,000 worth of his gold because he had no money and no house available. His bank was shut down because he couldn't have access to his bank account.
Was this during the fire? Was this during the fires?
During the fire. Didn't have his driver's license. He lost it. The state wouldn't give him a new license because he had no active mailing address. Real mess. So he came to Arizona to buy a house. He's moving everything over. He said, the only thing I got in my possession that I can get liquid with right now is my gold. I gave him a check for $286,000, and guess what? I didn't need his social, his driver's license. Sort of smiled, and I said, you know, I know you and Brannon talked about how this worked, but boy, this is great. I feel good. I got my money. Nobody bothered me, and I'm protected, and it's private. So you people out there who are sitting on your hands when Wes and I are sending you these requests and Brannon and you are talking to you, you better get active because you're going to pay me $4,000 an ounce the end of the year. Trust me.
You better get your. I highly suggest you get your free packet. You don't have to do anything. It's free, no obligation. Just simply go to worldviewgold.com, fill out the form, worldviewgold.com, or just text Wes and give him your name and address and say, I want the free packet. That's all you got to do. 602-558-8585, 602-558-8585. Joining me now is Chris Martenson. He's going to be a keynote speaker at our upcoming National Worldview Weekend, our 22nd annual National Worldview Weekend. Friday night, October 3rd, Saturday, October 4th. You can be here in person. Be brave and come attend in person. Collect together with us here in beautiful Collierville, Tennessee, if you dare. But if you don't want to join us here in person, then you can pick up 50% of the blessing by streaming it online when you join our vault at worldviewtube.com/vault. All right, it's been a while since we've had Chris on, and a ton has happened since then. Chris, welcome back to the broadcast. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you. It's good to be here. And I'm very much looking forward to meeting some of the amazing people you've assembled for that conference. Gordon Chang, Sidney Powell, Mark Rasmussen, among others. I haven't met any of those people in person yet.
Well, you're going to have an opportunity to visit with them, meet them, the whole nine yards. All right. I want to get your take on many things tonight. Digital IDs, the economy, the cut of the interest rates, increasing inflation, silver, gold, social credit scores, AI data centers. I mean, we have so much to get to. How about this one, too? I learned last night watching a show, correct me if I'm wrong, but the show host who said he was a long Wall Street guy, been on Wall Street for years, that you got these people that are making projections and they go into the market and they buy stuff, and I guess they have to have a bank account with $5,000 so to cover their loss, their shorts, right? And the guy said that he talked to a friend back in the 80s, and the friend said to him, oh yeah, I'm sorry I've been so hard to get a hold of and traveling a lot. And the Wall Street guy says to his friend, I didn't know your job required you to travel a lot. He said, oh yeah, I've been running around the country doing foreclosures. Wait a minute, I didn't know you were involved in foreclosures. Oh yeah, because all of these people couldn't make their shorts, so we're foreclosing on their house. And he went on to say that a lot of these folks don't realize when they play this game that they can actually lose their house. And he said most people that are doing this don't know they can lose their house doing this. And he's warning a lot of people are about to lose their homes because they're playing in an area they don't understand. Now, that was all new to me. Do you want to comment on what he's talking about? Is that accurate?
Well, it can be. So if you have a brokerage account, there's two kinds. A type 1 account is a cash account. You can't short stocks, you can't do options, any of that. But people who like to gamble and play, they're using what's called a margin account. It's a type 2 account. And those accounts, you can lose more than you actually have in the account easily by shorting stocks or selling a naked option of some kind, which means that you don't have a covered position. It could run against you. And it's entirely possible. Now, we have record amounts of what's called margin debt in the system right now, over $1 trillion. Some of that's the big boys and girls playing, but some of there's a lot of retail people out there who have been playing the game. And as long as everything's going up and to the right and the Fed's printing money and the federal government's deficit spending, things tend to float along. But if you get a big turning point, people will be shocked to discover that when you lose more than is in your account, you're actually on the hook for that. It is a recourse loan that you have. So they can come after all kinds of things. I hadn't heard about coming after houses, but wouldn't surprise me.
All right. Now, you did a lot of investigation on the attempted assassination of President Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania. The actual assassination of Charlie Kirk looked very similar. What are you making of this? There's a lot of people speculating. What have you learned? Have you studied it at all? I know you got a lot going on. I think you just had your national conference. Did you have any time to study this? And if so, what have you learned? What are your questions?
Well, the assassination happened on the 10th, and I was, our national conference started the 12th. So I didn't have a lot of time to pour into it, but here are the similarities. The FBI is not being transparent or forthcoming, no matter what Kash Patel says. There's a lot of things we don't know right now that could be cleared up if they could just be transparent. So initially, it looked like lone gunman, one shot, goes to the neck, kills him. It's entirely possible that's true, but the way that he moved and the wound here looked a little bit more like an exit than an entrance. Listen, if we just had some autopsy photos or some data like that, that'd be great. If we could see, there was a camera right behind him that got disassembled and taken down within minutes. If we had some footage from that, that could be helpful. So listen, there's so many things now that are adding up that just don't add up. Allegedly, there was this big, long texting thing between the putative culprit here, Robinson, and his gay lover. But when you actually read those, they're odd. They read, somebody I think had a great quote. They said, this reads like a missing chapter from Pride and Prejudice. It's like some old novel. And it had law enforcement terms in there that don't really, not how you would expect a 22-year-old necessarily to converse. That was odd. Wait, what happened to the gun? That was odd. There's all these oddities now. And I hate to say this, but our current FBI is just about as transparent as the last FBI we had for the Butler shooting, and they could put all this to rest by just giving us actual information and some data.
Yeah, they could, because I'm starting to think that looks more like the exit wound, not the entry.
Kind of
wound.
does, right?
All right.
Well, it does, and just the way his body moves and the earpiece flying out. There's a lot of oddities again, and look, you'll always find some oddities in something like this, but there's enough adding up here that I think it doesn't add up currently. And the whole timeline of when this kid, did he get dressed? Did he change his clothes? Did he not? Where's the gun? Did he allegedly he disassembled it and then reassembled it? And that all seems very unlikely for somebody who's under that amount of stress, right? Obviously, executing somebody publicly that's going to jack your adrenaline. The idea that you could actually, operate a screwdriver and an Allen wrench and take everything apart and then put it all back together, it just doesn't sit right. Doesn't make a lot of sense.
No, sure doesn't. And then I see you actually wrote on something we covered the other day, FBI Operation Arctic Frost, targeted turning point, time for a national divorce, ? I think the answer is yes, it's time for a national divorce. I think I don't want a civil war, but there's no way this union can stay together. Now, I know folks like Trevor Loudon will say, well, if we do that, we're just playing right into the hands of China and others that want us to, split apart. Well, be as it may, this isn't working. Staying into this relationship with the federal government isn't working. And, I'm sorry if it plays into the hands of China or Russia or whoever, but continuing down a path of slavery is playing into the hands of China and Russia too. So we're damned if we do and we're damned if we don't, right? So I'd rather die as a free man than a slave.
Well, sometimes you divorce because you have what they call irreconcilable differences.
That's right.
And right now, I consider my differences with those who were cheering the murder of Charlie Kirk because he said things that they found offensive enough to justify murder. Their moral framework is so different from mine that that's irreconcilable. There's no halfway. There's no like, well, let's just negotiate, Chris. Sometimes it's okay. Like, nope, I have a moral point of view. I'm a free speech absolutist. I have the right to say things. And I also have the right to experience the backlash or the beneficence of that, right? Because, you take the good and the bad. No, these people think that it's okay to murder somebody if they say something that they disagree with. I don't see that. These people also, big overlap, tend to think it's okay for them to mandate what goes into my child's body without any scientific basis or evidence. They also think that it's perfectly okay for a transgender person to read to 5-year-olds. And I just don't think that's appropriate, right? So there's these differences. It really comes down to a worldview that I think is irreconcilable at this point. And G. Edward Griffin, who you've had on your program, did a great job. These are the collectivists. They believe in ideologies. They believe in abstractions, and they're really adherents to ideas. And I believe in individual rights, individual liberty. And I think that all of prosperity flows from real people making real decisions and taking real risks and putting their lives on the line. And so it's really between the abstraction and reality. The abstractions people, they just live in a world that I just don't think comports with reality. And the reality people, I don't know how you reconcile these anymore, Brennan. I don't think they can be put together. And here's why I'm worried. They could not possibly re-educate me to their positions, right? They'll never get me to agree that to affirm gender, it would be an appropriate thing for my daughters to mutilate themselves. They're just never going to get me. Not in this lifetime. Can't bring me over. So they're sure I'm in the wrong, and I'm equally sure they're in the wrong, and that they also probably can't get re-educated in this lifetime. So what do you do when you have people who have irreconcilable worldviews where there's no middle ground? There's no like, well, maybe the lawn should be 6 inches. You think 5 inches. We'll compromise. 5.5 inches is the cut line for our agreement. I don't know how to reconcile this anymore. And that's just come to me in the past couple of weeks, and it really solidified around the reactions to Charlie Kirk's murder. And that's just where I'm sitting right now.
Yep. Well, let's talk about the FCC chairman coming out. Logan, can we pull the clip by the FCC chairman? Because I have no problem with Sinclair Media or what's it called? What's the other company? Star something another? Star? Huh?
Nexstar.
Nexstar. Yeah. I have no problem with these companies saying, we're not carrying a show. They're we can carry what we want. They can carry what they want. Not a problem.
Yep.
What I have a problem with is when they have the federal government leaning on people and the federal government saying, well, we don't like this. This is not in the public interest. I saw somebody with the Federalist today, who I normally like and agree with on many issues, saying, well, the FCC, it's about what's in the public interest. And I said on the radio today, well, how do we know in the next administration they say it's not in the public interest for Brannon to be on 74 Christian terrestrial radio stations? Okay, just for those who know, to remind everybody, I'm on 74 Christian terrestrial stations, AM and FM, right? Okay, that's under FCC rules. Those are FCC license. On the internet, I'm not. Right? On Roku and these other platforms, we're not. Mm-hmm. But what if the FCC calls up the network and says, we don't think it's in the best interest of the public to hear from Brannon Howse what he's saying about Islam, what he's saying about the exclusivity of Jesus Christ. John 14:6, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes unto the Father except through me. That's not very tolerant. Or that he is reading from Romans chapter 1 on the LGBTQ agenda and providing all this commentary. That's hateful. So he's Islamophobic, he's homophobic, xenophobic. He's got to go. It's not in the public interest. I'm sorry. When did the public interest become the standard for being on radio? And who defines that? I don't even think when we looked up today, the FCC even has a standard for public interest. We looked it up. We don't think they even have it. They do it case by case. And yet here we have all these people cheering the government, putting pressure on companies to dump Kimmel. Look, if the free market wants to say there's no audience, there are no advertisers, they're pulling their advertising, we can't sustain a profit, it's collapsed, then the free market decides. But you deal with the free speech. You don't have to like what he said. Let's debate what he said, right? I mean, I told my team, somebody get Jimmy on my show. I want to debate with him. What did you mean? Why did you say this? Did you not? There's other information out there? You know, I mean, this is going to flip on us so badly, and we are slitting our own throats. Is the conservative movement this stupid, or is it? I mean, because my audience, I don't think is buying into this. But then again, my audience isn't the typical Fox News talk radio crowd. I told my wife today, most talk radio is entertainment. It's not to educate you. It's just to entertain you and distract you. Right, left, right, left. You've already made that reference now. I said, babe, my show is different. Years ago, we said we are not going to try to have the biggest audience. Because to have the biggest audience, I'm going to have to be an inch deep and a mile long. And I'm not going to sit here and talk to morons all day. Okay? Do I want to educate people? Yes. But I cannot bring people along if I'm only allowed to go an inch deep and a mile wide. I've got to be able to talk about communitarianism, globalism, sustainable development, Agenda 21, Fabian socialism, Marxism, communism, postmodernism, a lot of isms. And if they don't want to keep up with that, then this show's not for them. Because we're like the Marines, the few, the proud, okay? I said to my audience years ago, we are programming for an educated audience. Happens to also be that an educated audience, whether self-educated or formal education, tends to be a middle upper class audience, which guess what? That means they also have the funds by which to keep a network like ours going. Or we can cater to the dumbed down masses, never really accomplish anything because those people will never be leaders. And they broke. And you can have 1 million of them following you on Twitter and they have nothing. They're broke. Or you can say, I want to educate people that are already partly educated or new people who want to be educated. And educated people, as I said, tend to be people who work hard, who apply themselves, who have discretionary income and can support a network like ours because they see it as a public service. And that's what we've done. And many people will ask me in the broadcast world, how is it your organization grows and does what it does? Because we're not looking for the biggest audience. And I know a lot of people have a lot of followers, but they have no resources by which to go anywhere other than their basement. So what we do here is educating people. But by that very nature, we're going to be offensive because we're not catering to the masses. And that's why I ask. My audience gets it. But most of your so-called conservatives out there or MAGA people, they're not the brightest knives in the drawer. I'm sorry. They're not. They're reactionaries. They're not using reason, logic, and context. They're having emotional and political reactions, including some of it is revenge. Well, that's always a dangerous game to play. Chris?
You know, during COVID, I struggled a lot with this because I ran up against the censors and I got censored a lot. And we found out later the government was inside Twitter and YouTube and leaning on them. And they had the CISA people and the FBI and all this stuff. So we had to struggle through what they called misinformation, disinformation, malinformation, these vague terms, but they'll know it when they see it. And that was bad. And I hated it. The idea that Pam Bondi's going to come out and say, well, we have to, legitimately curb hateful speech. What is that, right? It's not a term that anybody can define, and it doesn't make a lot of sense. Look, you either have the First Amendment or you don't. The government shall make no laws abridging the freedom of speech. Now, listen, it could be hateful speech. It could be harmful speech even. But the cure for that is better speech every time, 100% of the time. I didn't like Jimmy Kimmel, his whole wheezy thing during COVID, bad taste. By the way, don't forget he started on The Man Show where his ethics included we're going to put girls on trampolines and, be crude and all that. That's who he is. And he was just sort of a crude guy. I didn't think he was all that funny. I didn't consume his program. I don't care. If Sinclair says, hey, we have sagging numbers and he's not reaching people and nobody finds him funny, which is, guess what? you can't be woke and funny at the same time. It's kind of like a bad combo. It just doesn't pan out. I get it. But the government should not step in. And it disturbs me that because it's the Trump administration stepping in, some people are okay with that now. Yep. We're just getting bait and switched, right? Yeah. It was like, first Trump, Biden does it and then Trump does it. We lose a little here, we lose a little more there. It's just the same program is running, which gets us to that authoritarian worldview where this is where we're going. That whole technocracy, which I saw in your prior piece, that's where we're going. Mm-hmm. And it's going faster under Trump than it did under Biden right now. We're losing more.
Isn't that interesting what you just said? It is going faster under President Trump than it did under Biden, because my executive producer of the Worldview Report said that very same thing to me today in a conversation. He said, we are moving so quickly toward technocracy under Trump. We are headed in the same direction, but really quite faster in some regards under President Trump. Does he understand this? Does he understand that he is being led down a cattle chute?
I don't know. If I had to guess, I would say no.
I agree with you. I don't think he knows.
Yeah, I don't think so, but I don't know for sure. But look what just happened, right? So Elon comes in, finds some stuff with Doge. I was all in favor of having the whiz kids with their AI programs, like just sort of like tear through the bureaucracy like it didn't exist, and that was great. But then Trump pulled the plug on that. But you know what got left behind? Palantir is now linking all the major databases, the IRS database, the health database. They want a one database for every citizen, entry. You'll have a comprehensive entry, Brennan, right? And then, I like what RFK is doing a lot in HHS, but the replacement person they picked for the CDC is one of Peter Thiel, that's Palantir's, top lieutenants. Like, it just, you can feel it coming. And I understand the push. These technocrats, by the way, to put them into the sort of the Fabian socialist architecture, they've been working on this since the 30s, right? They have been very patient. They have been working towards this idea that if we could just get the right technology in place, they could finally administrate the world like it needed to be, right? Experts rule, just a few tiny people at the top making all the decisions. And we're pushing towards that ever faster. And it's happening a lot under Trump because the people who were sort of pushing back against this were on the right, as it were. They're on the MAGA side. And because Trump is in there, I see a lot of them confused about whether they should be upset. There's some of them will say, you can't say anything bad about Trump. I won't hear it at all. There's others who are starting to have some questions. Right?
There are. Yeah, there are. Which is why, by the way, our numbers are going up. Okay. Our numbers keep going up. I wouldn't change course even if they were going down, because I'm not going to be a whore. Okay. I'm not going to be a political TV whore. Okay. I'm not going to be a lapdog. Okay. We have Sean Hannity, I think, for that. He can be the lapdog.
Yeah.
Okay. But our numbers are going up. And I think it's because people realize House isn't a political animal for one party or the other. He's just a journalist and a truth seeker and a truth teller. And I think they know that. So I would imagine your numbers are going up for the same reason, right?
Well, a lot of people are waking up now, and because it couldn't be more obvious just how broken things are. And we're getting more. This is more important to me because what you said earlier about your audience is really important to me too, is that I like to reach people who have agency and resources and know how to act, right? I'd rather reach one person who's going to do something with that information than a million people who will do nothing with it.
Exactly.
I'm totally clear on that, So more people with agency are starting to show up because, let's be clear about this, the technocrats are fundamentally a collectivist, communist sort of a worldview. And they believe that this time we're going to rebuild the Tower of Babel, but it's a technology tower this time, and it's going to be great. As what could go wrong? And they live in their little echo bubble, and they don't understand how the world works. And I'm over here understanding that the economy is a complex system, that it needs energy, it needs real people doing real things, that we're not all going to run by robots anytime soon. But they're trying to push us into this direction. I think they can feel their finger on the brass ring, like, we're almost ready. And that's why things are speeding up so much right now. well, if they do that, what they don't understand is that they're going to break the very thing they're trying to manage because it's an unmanageable thing. They have a lot of hubris. You would need you need to have just a wee bit of humility to understand that not only can it not be managed, but it shouldn't be managed. An economy is a collection of people making individual decisions across a wide range of new variables. Like your situation in Tennessee is going to be different from somebody in Palo Alto, is going to be different from somebody in Palm Beach versus where I live, right? And we all have to react on that basis. They are busy breaking this economy. By the way, under Trump, remember we were supposed to have all this amazing stuff. Our trade deficit just clocked one of its highest 7-month periods. And for August, our actual federal government deficit was $348 billion when total receipts were $344 billion, meaning we took in one, but we spent two. This is totally unsustainable. They threw in the towel on Doge. We're just going to spend like drunken sailors. Somehow this is all going to work out. And, I'm just not buying it at this point. So
I'm not either.
People have to be ready.
And gold's continue to go up. Silver's going up. We cut, the Fed has cut. They're going to do more cuts. This is going to be inflationary. I want to get into that for just a second, but before we get too far away from some of the things President Trump is saying that make me nervous, because I don't want, if this was Joe Biden, if Joe Biden said what we're about to hear President Trump say to an ABC reporter, what if this was Joe Biden saying this to a right side broadcasting reporter, Joe Biden saying this to a Christian Broadcasting Network, CBN reporter, President Trump saying this to a One America News reporter? How would people respond to this? Listen.
It is appropriate, President Trump, that a president in office should be engaged in so much business activity.
Well, I'm really not. My kids are running the business. I'm here. You know what the activity, where are you from?
I'm from the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, Four Corners program.
Well, the Australians, you're hurting Australia, right? In my opinion, you are hurting Australia very much right now. And they want to get along with me. Your leader is coming over to see me very soon. I'm going to tell him about you. You set a very bad tone.
Well,
go ahead, John. You can set a nicer tone.
UAE does a deal.
I'm going to tell him about you. You're setting a bad tone. So I'm going to run tattle on you with another leader because you're setting a bad tone asking a question. I thought it was ABC. No, it is. Here's another one. So I guess he's done this twice now when he didn't like a question. Okay. But this is the free press. Can you hear Ronald Reagan saying that? I'm going to go tell another leader, the leader of your country, because I don't like your question. This is what I'm talking about. But here's the one I thought I was playing. Here we go.
And what do you make Pam Bondi saying she's going to go after hate speech? Is that, a lot of your allies say hate speech is free speech.
You probably go after people like you because you treat me so unfairly. It's hate.
Wait a minute. That is a legitimate question. That's the kind of question I would ask, because I think, and I've been against hate speech for a long time, probably a decade or more. We've got 15, 16, 17, 18, maybe 20 years. You go back into my broadcast schedule, listening to me talk about hate speech and how that's going to be a ruse to get rid of people like me. But I'm sorry, Mr. Trump. I'm sorry. I like to cheer you on when I can, but it's not about you, okay? It's about the country. And immediately he turns it to about himself. Listen to this.
And what do you make Pam Bondi saying she's going to go after hate speech? Is that, a lot of your allies say hate speech is free speech.
You probably go after people like you because you treat me so unfairly. It's hate. You have a lot of hate in your heart. Maybe they'll come after ABC. Well, ABC paid me $16 million recently for a form of hate speech, right? Your company paid me $16 million for a form of hate speech. So maybe they'll have to go after you. Look, we want everything to be fair. It hasn't been fair. And the radical left has done tremendous damage to the country. But we're fixing it.
Okay. But life isn't fair. Didn't your parents tell you that? And didn't you just prove the point? We don't need hate speech laws where the government prosecutes people. ABC supposedly said something about you. You sued them. You got $16 million. That's the free market and the legal system working it out. But I don't like the questions you ask. The things you say are hateful, and we'll probably be going after people like you because you treat me so unfairly. So you want the federal government coming down on broadcasters because the leaders get their feelings hurt? So the next administration is going to say, well, we're going to go after and prosecute Brannon Howse for hate speech because he's critical of people in the administration. Are you aware of this clip I just played?
I hadn't heard it yet, but I can react to it because I'm familiar with the case. He didn't sue ABC for hate speech. It was libel and defamation. And we already have laws on the books for that. If you libel somebody or you defame them, there's a remedy for that. He pursued that remedy in the courts and he won. He prevailed. Apparently they libeled him. So that's totally fine. But he turned it in his head to say they practiced hate speech on me. So now he's showing that sort of a petulant side. Like, they were treating me unfairly and it was hateful. That's not what this was. So I don't like this tone that we're going to go after hate speech now, because that's just a different version of disinformation, malinformation, misinformation, right? Mm-hmm. And none of those are valid. There's no such thing. There's no way to define hate speech. So I'm totally against this, and it's a troubling turn of events, to be sure.
And it isn't just one example. We've given a couple tonight, okay? So I want to cheer President Trump's administration when I can, but my job is to go with the truth and to project trends and to warn of danger. And this is dangerous. We are going to slit our own throats as a country, as conservatives, as patriots, as constitutionalists, as Christians, as broadcasters, as free speech, as you say, absolutists. I mean, but do you think Sean Hannity's going to be calling out President Trump tonight, or is he going to continue to be his lapdog? Because I don't think most of the conservatives are going to do what we're doing tonight, are they? No. But look, I mean, I'm a big believer in the Constitution. It's worked really, really well. Obviously, it's been violated here and there along the way, but either we're a nation of laws or we're not. If we are, then we have to stick to them. If we're not, maybe we should have an open conversation about that and redefine what we think those laws are. What I fear most is this growing sort of amorphous thing where the rule of law isn't followed. We don't really have laws. We have activist judges. We have petulant presidents. It just becomes chaotic very quickly. Societies are based on two pillars: fairness and reciprocity. Those are the twin pillars of society. Well, that fairness side, Brennan, you can't have fair if you have just random applications of the law based on whim. It just doesn't work. That's how things break down very quickly. Mm-hmm. All right. Then finally, where we're headed, this economy. We've got the big, beautiful bill. It's adding in trillions over the next few years. We've got an interest rate cut with more to come, which is going to make more money, which is create more inflation. Peter Schiff and others were saying we should have left interest rates where they were, maybe even raised them. Others will say, no, we have to get the economy going again. Aren't we just continuing to build bigger and bigger and bigger bubbles, which means bigger and bigger and bigger busts?
Yes. So obviously the stock market's in bubble territory, and by every measure, it's not just a little bit expensive, it's in record territory. You got that. 2, we're not controlling anything around the spending side. 3, M2, which is a broad measure of money, is exploding across the developed world, right? US, Japan, Europe, everywhere. And into that mix, we have things like stocks at all-time highs, Bitcoin all-time, gold at all-time highs, home ownership at like least affordable ever. And the Fed cuts rates. Honestly, I could make a stronger case for the Fed doing a surprise 50 basis point hike a couple days ago, but they're cutting for political reasons or whatever. But that cutting is the Fed clearly saying, we're ready to throw more people under the inflationary bus. The last month, if you annualized it, inflation was clocking in at 5%, as you and I both know, and your listeners, I assume, know. They undercount. It's actually higher than that. Oh, yeah. Last year, property taxes went up 7%. Last year, eggs, over the last 5 years, up 170%. Like, everything's just much, much higher. And the Fed said, yeah, let's have more of that. And so that capitulation it's very dangerous. But anybody listening, you have to be ready for the idea that inflation is going to be 2 times to 3 times higher than they're officially saying, and much higher than most people are ready for, especially people who are retired.
Are we headed to hyperinflation eventually? Is that how this ends?
Eventually.
Or do you think do we go to hyper, or do they switch us to the new system and avoid that?
I don't see how the new system avoids that, because what's the new system? It's just going to be some currency unit. The only thing, so let me be positive. Let me tell you something that Trump could do, or another future president. You could come in and just throw the bankers out, just like break the money changers' tables, right? And issue a national currency directly from the Treasury. Because right now we're going to spend this year $1.2 trillion on interest on the federal debt. Now, what is that? Well, that's because we instantiated this thing called the Federal Reserve. And they were supposed to, back in the day, 1913, they set that up. Kind of, you had tellers, and there was paper cash, and there was gold sitting in vaults. And it took, you could understand, you could make the case for why would you pay bankers to administrate your money for you. I could make the case, I still don't like the Fed anyway, even back then, but different story. Fast forward to today. We are now borrowing money from the banking system and paying $1.2 trillion for that system to lend us that money. In this day and age, Brennan, there's no reason for that. It doesn't cost $1.2 trillion to administer a money system. Doesn't even cost 1/100th that amount. You can issue money directly, run it yourself, run it on a few servers. It's not a big deal. So why are we paying $1.2 trillion to bankers to lend us our own money back to us? It's a crazy thing. I know it's a little bit of an out there idea, but if somebody wanted to do something that would make me sit up and go, that's okay, that might work, we would begin to issue money directly from the Treasury and cut the bankers out of this story.
So people need to be thinking about hard assets, gold, silver, land, rental properties, something that it's like I think it was maybe Mark Twain said it. I'm not as concerned about the return on my investment as I am the return of my investment.
Mm-hmm.
I think people should be thinking about, I'm not as concerned about building wealth right now as I am preserving wealth. And wealth is whatever you have, folks, whether that's 20,000, 30,000, 100,000, $500,000, whatever you've worked your whole life for. Right now, you should be, in my opinion, I don't give financial advice, I give financial opinion. In my opinion, you should be thinking about preservation, not as concerned with how much money you make, but how much of the money do you have that you can preserve? And that means you have to put it into something that's going to go up as the dollar goes down and is devalued as they print more, produce more. And that's hard assets that go up in value. Gold, silver, land, houses, cattle, that kind of thing. People have got to think about preservation. True or false?
Absolutely true. We've been down this road. We humans have been down this road many times. It always seems like a good idea to try and print your way out of this. The Fed's running out of room in this story. They know they're making a policy error by cutting into those conditions I just described with inflation already high. We're almost certainly going into a double hump inflationary spike, just like we did 73 to 78. And then from 79 to 84, there was two big waves of inflation. We're going to do that again, probably for almost exactly the same reasons. Policy errors plus an energy crisis. It's all coming. But when that happens, this time the Fed has way less runway to operate with, because right now, total credit market debt in the U.S., total, this includes federal debt, which people talk about, but this is everything: household debt, student debt, corporate debt. We're at $104 trillion of debt in the U.S., which means there's not a lot of room to borrow a lot more into this story. And if you can't do that to get things going again, you have a deflationary collapse risking on one side of this knife edge the Fed's trying to walk. And on the other side is this hyperinflationary collapse. They're both collapses just for different reasons. But when the dust settles, most people have lost most of their wealth by one process or the other. But that's because it's already been hopelessly betrayed. That capital is gone. We borrowed and spent it on things that weren't productive investments. A lot of long story around that. I don't know what the Fed can do at this point. I really don't. There's no way to manage the dollar as I can see it right now, Brennan, where this squares out. You're going to have to understand they're going to try something else. So, hey, they'll try something, a stable coin, a CBDC. None of that's going to work. The only thing that could possibly work at this point is for them to go into a new system of currency and just like let the old one burn down. They could try that. Not a lot of chance that that's going to have a strong, not a lot of models we can say, here's how that worked out the last time somebody tried that. There are a couple, but they're not really applicable today, I don't think. So what do you do? What does somebody listening to this do? Gold and silver, land, productive land in particular, trees on it, good soil, houses, real assets. That's the only thing that history has said gets you by when your currency system is breaking down. So very quickly, the way I think about this, primary wealth is the base form of wealth of any nation. So that's when you get onto when people arove at a land, what do you have? You got land, you got oil in the ground, you got big trees, you got rich fishing grounds. That's primary wealth. Secondary wealth is what happens when humans convert that into fish at the market, vegetables at the market, lumber in the store, things like that. So secondary wealth is producing off of the primary wealth. But if you don't have oil as primary wealth, you're not going to have a secondary wealth of refineries and gas stations and all that. So here's the transitive rule. Primary wealth begets secondary wealth. On top of that, tertiary wealth is the last thing, and that's currency and stocks and bonds and derivatives. It's claims on the other forms of wealth. We're at that point in history where people, when you say wealth, they're almost entirely, their heads are up in tertiary. Mm-hmm. They're in that third order of wealth. Yes. That's all they think about. But you have to understand that if you don't have primary wealth, there's no secondary. And without secondary, that tertiary has zero value. So what I try to do is help people understand that you want to just get out of that tertiary, get back into secondary, get into primary if you can. Owning those has been the only surefire way to get through these times.
Well said. And folks, if you want to follow more, there it is. peakprosperity.com or on X at Chris Martenson. Spell it with a MartenSon at Chris Martenson or peakprosperity.com. And he'll be with us just in a couple of weeks right here in the Mid-South. Friday night, October 3rd, Saturday, October 4th. worldviewstore.com to get your ticket or join the vault to live stream it and hear what he has to say. Great stuff. Chris, thank you for being with us. Thank you for being a person that puts together reason, logic, and context, not emotion, but facts.
You're welcome, and thank you for being the same.
Thank you. Chris Martenson checking in, folks. All right, guys, before we go, tomorrow night, we have an explosive program for you. I mean, you're going to be blown away. That's all I can tell you about it. You're not going to want to miss it. You're not going to want to say, it's Friday night. I'll go out to dinner and take a break. No, you're going to want to watch this broadcast tomorrow night. I've been given some information. I've been given some videos that I am told have never been broadcast to the public. I'm going to bring those to you tomorrow night. I have two very, very special guests that will be in studio. And I think tomorrow night will blow your mind. All right? That's all I can tell you. I don't want to say more because I don't want to give anything away and cause any disruptions. But you're going to want to be here tomorrow night to hear what's going to be talked about and see what's going to be shown. All right. Now, with that being said, before we head off, remember, if you appreciate this broadcast, I have to have your support. Thousands and thousands of dollars in bandwidth bills to push out free programming. Takes a lot to put together a 30-minute newscast every night on top of all the programming we give away. And then our Sunday night church service where I'm teaching through the book of Revelation. If you appreciate all we're doing, folks, to defend the First Amendment, free speech, freedom of religion, parental authority, private property, the right to your Christian conscience. If you appreciate all that we do, the rule, talking about our constitutional republic, folks, I need your help. There's a lot of you that watch that can support us, and you don't. Please do. If you are, thank you for doing that. Thank you for continuing to support us. You also will find our mailing address there if you prefer to support us through the mail. Worldviewfoundation.com, worldviewfoundation.com. All right, roll the music. Let's call it a night. Dolly, come on over here and say goodnight. Come on. Come on. Come here. Why are you going to be like that? You come over here when I don't call you, but you don't come when I call. You're playing hard to get, aren't you? All right, fine. Don't come over and say hi to everybody. That's fine. No problem. I just used a little reverse psychology on her. I knew you'd come over if I ignored you. Yeah, you're predictable, aren't you? Yeah. All right, say goodnight, America. All right? Thank you, guys. That's so sweet. May God save America. Take care.
Faith, spiritual values, moral issues, government, economy, education, work, responsibility. What we think about these depends on our worldview. Now, VCY America presents Worldview Radio with Brannon Howse.
All right, welcome. Glad you're with us on this September 18th, 2025. I'm going to be joined by Usama Dakdoc, and then I'm going to be joined by Dr. Andy Woods. He can't be with us tomorrow, so we're going to go ahead and have him join us at the bottom of the hour. But first up, all the talk about Israel. Israel runs the country. Israel runs America, and we are all run by politicians controlled by Israel. Now, this has been the narrative going on, but there is a really important video because we're talking about trillions of dollars being pumped into the U.S. by Qatar. Now, I know we've brought this up before, but I want to play for you a short video, which is audio, obviously, for radio, and get your response to it with Usama Dakdoc. Now, tonight on Brannon Howse Live, I am going to deal with this issue of Jimmy Kimmel. I, as you know, was on Jimmy Kimmel's broadcast probably 15, 20 times. Not in studio, because I have no intentions to go to California. I've been there, done that a few times, but never again. But he would pull clips and make fun of myself and Mike Lindell and others. And I got a handwritten note from Jimmy with a vest. And of course, I sent him a handkerchief with a J on it because he was making fun of mine one night. I sent it to him. And some of the back and forth was fun. He never was cruel to me. I think at times he was definitely cruel to poor Mike Lindell. But I'm going to have Mike Lindell on tonight to talk about the cancellation of Jimmy Kimmel, or I guess what is the suspension? I don't know. Is it going to be a full-time cancellation? I don't know. But here is my topic in part tonight. I think the right needs to be very careful when they talk about, as Pam Bondi came out this week and was talking about, we're going to go after you for hate crime speech when you say things we don't like about conservatives. I don't like what people are saying about conservatives and Christians and Jews, or people celebrating the assassination of Charlie Kirk. I don't like any of that. It's revolting. But we better be very careful, because this is a double-edged sword. Because as soon as you say, well, that's offensive, well, guess what? The gospel is offensive. The cross is foolishness to those who are perishing. And the gospel is offensive. Why is it that you can take the cross, as has been done and funded, I've written about it in my books over the last few decades, take the cross, as was funded by the National Endowment for the Arts, put it in a bottle of urine, and that's called art? Because you're making a tolerance, you're making a commentary about the cross, about the gospel, about Jesus, who said, I'm the only way, the only truth, the only life. No one comes unto the Father except through me. That's exclusive. That is not inclusive. That's offensive. And so political correctness says we don't tolerate intolerance. Therefore, putting the cross in a bottle of urine, calling it art, funded through your tax dollars and mine, through the National Endowment for the Arts, was done. Now, if you speak truth about Islam, LGBTQ, et cetera, these things are now considered intolerant. I heard someone today who I normally agree with saying, well, the FCC, they are to be out there so that we can broadcast what is in the public interest. Wrong-o. What's in the public interest? Can someone please, in the control room, look up what are the requirements of the FCC for broadcasting and a broadcasting license? which I know our friends at VCY know very well. They've been doing this for, 60 years?